You ever film a video that's probably gonna get you burned at the stake by a bunch of vegans? Hey y'all, it's me Alex. Today I'm going to be talking about the ethics of cruelty-free beauty and my thoughts on it as someone who has been cruelty-free for a long time, but my thoughts have evolved on the subject a lot more. I hope with this video we can have a nuanced discussion. I hope with this video you understand that my intention is to shed some light on other things that cruelty-free makeup might have that are not cruelty-free. That cruelty-free makeup isn't entirely cruelty-free just because it's not tested on animals, and that there's so much more nuance to the conversation that we need to have in order to, I think, make this a good discussion about how to be an ethical consumer, because it goes beyond animal testing to me. That being said, I think that's kind of a good thesis statement for this paper, so let's just get into the video. Okay, so I'm gonna prime my eyes. I'm also gonna use my Melt Gemini palette today. I'm going in to do some work today, but I'm also filming this on a Friday, so I figure I can get a little spicy and do something pretty interesting. Y'all know that I tout myself as a cruelty-free beauty YouTuber person, and I want to clarify at the very beginning of this video that that's something that I don't feel like is going to change about me. Animal welfare is something that I absolutely care about, but no but. There is absolutely no but about that. It is a very important cause to me, and I wouldn't, that's not something I'm going to drop too terribly easily. But I do think that this is a very important conversation to have. I already alluded to this a couple years ago when I did an It's Complicated video on like what constitutes being cruelty-free, that it goes beyond parent companies and third-party testing for me. And I guess that this video is kind of an expansion on that in my mind. A few weeks ago, my friends Audra and Emily did a really good live stream on like the privilege of being cruelty-free. And this was something that really got me thinking. Like, I've been thinking about this for a very long time, especially because I'm just someone who thinks about the ethics of things a whole lot. And I'm gonna link that live down below just because they made a lot of very good points. But it is absolutely a privilege to buy cruelty-free makeup, such as it is a privilege to be vegetarian or vegan. I've been a vegetarian since I was 13. I've attempted to be vegan. I definitely cut out a lot of animal products that aren't just meat, but I also have, my hair, please don't get weird on me. But I also have some dietary restrictions that would make being fully vegan for me all the time very difficult. White vegans, don't come at me in the comments. And the same thing goes for cruelty-free makeup. So there's lots of things that go into that, like for example, accessibility. So when I'm at home in my very small town in Virginia, about 400 people, I go to the drugstore and there is maybe one brand that is considered cruelty-free that is sold there. They have Wet n Wild, which is a point that I'm going to come to in a little bit, because I know not everyone considers Wet n Wild cruelty-free. I didn't for a while. But in a smaller town like that, simply when you go to the drugstore, when you have to drive an hour to get to a Sephora or an Ulta, there's that simple accessibility factor of not everyone's going to be able to get that, to get cruelty-free makeup. And that's one thing that we just genuinely need to keep in that conversation. And that doesn't even talk about the kind of expense that surrounds that as well, that, sometimes buying cruelty-free makeup is a little bit more expensive. And it's something that I have prioritized because to me makeup is a luxury, but it's not a luxury for everyone. Women perceive people, there's so much sexism in the workplace that a lot of times, you have to wear makeup in order to, be considered pretty enough to hire, things of that nature. And there's a whole lot of politics around being pretty, basically. So in a way, it's not necessarily accessible for everyone, even from just like a financial or a location-based standpoint. Now, that's not even bringing into shade ranges or, what brands make products that are inclusive of everyone. And a lot of times at a drugstore price point, a lot of the brands that are considered cruelty-free don't really have the best shade range. That's just a simple fact of it to me, that you have to take into account as well. Maybelline has a pretty decent shade range in their foundation, same with L'Oreal. Now, I'm not saying that those are completely ethical companies. Aside from their non-cruelty-free status, I'm not going to claim that of any company. I am going to say that there are certain things that are definitely more accessible to others, and I quite frankly have the privilege of my face My skin tone is one that you can find in just about anything. I can walk into any drugstore, any Sephora, any Ulta, and find my shade in there. Then I even choose to shirk that responsibility by not really wearing a heavy base product or anything like that. Then to me, there is just like the ethicalness of the owners as well. Can you think about how many cruelty-free makeup brands are owned by people like Jeffree Star that are problematic in that way? I'm going to use Jeffree Star as a very specific example because I think we can all agree that we don't like him. I would like to agree on that, but fuck, I forgot my glitter glue and I want to go get it. Oh well, I'll just pack this on. That's not taking into account the allegations against him and Davy Vanity, or the way that he treats his fans, the way he treats his friends, just a general verbal abuse that that man commits against most human beings. But yet he's still considered a cruelty-free brand with a lot of vegan options, and I've seen so many cruelty-free people be like, oh my gosh, he doesn't test on animals, he's such a good person. Besides, he wears fucking furs. Like, fur and leather, and I don't think that man is buying it from a thrift store either. He's not fucking Macklemore. Somehow I don't think he's doing that. Somehow I think that, you know, he's not the type of guy to walk into a thrift store and say, oh, let me buy this secondhand so I can keep warm in the winter, you know, in LA. And then let's talk about Wet n Wild. So, oh gosh, why did a cloud have to come by the window? How rude. God, rude. Let's talk about Wet n Wild Physicians Formula. So last summer, Wet n Wild Physicians Formula, I think a few others, were all revealed to have been selling in China, basically. And as we all know that China is probably the most notorious country for testing their imported goods on animals to make sure that they are safe. I've since actually watched whatever the documentary that Marlene Estelle was in on Netflix, and they talked about like a lot of countries will animal test because of like counterfeits and stuff that are imported into the country, basically. I'm not saying that's right, I'm saying that's a reason. That's to be taken into account. So Wet n Wild, I've since changed my stance on, because at the time I thought, oh well, they're being douchebags. They value profit over just about anything else, and that's true for most companies, because guess what, we're in a fucking capitalistic society and ain't nothing gonna change that. I have since learned from some cruelty-free bloggers who I admire, for example, Pheronix, as well as My Beauty Bunny, that the regulations that Wet n Wild and Physicians Formula were under in going there were strictly about post-market testing, meaning that the product, if deemed unsafe, could be pulled off the shelves and tested on animals in order to make sure it was safe. Now that's still pretty shitty, considering that there are lots of options for human-based testing. However, what I have learned through their content and through their posts is that China does their post-market testing and pulling stuff off the shelves at about the same rate that the United States does. If I were to boycott a brand for doing that in China, then I would have to boycott any brand that does it in the United States. And that basically, well, one, that obviously I live in the United States, so that wouldn't work. But on another hand too, that basically that means that about 99% of the time it doesn't happen. That 1% is very rare and under very specific circumstances where they feel like the product is genuinely unsafe. So that happens at the exact same rate in the United States as it does in China. So that's why I'm specifically considering like Wet n Wild, Physicians Formula, other companies that do that to be cruelty-free. But let's even get into the politics of who gives a fuck if that weren't. So, there is something that I have noticed often in the cruelty-free community. There's a sense of xenophobia surrounding China. And I think we get that in the US anyway, because there's so much fear-mongering about what China is as a country, how it treats its people. And I'm not gonna say that like every country in the world is equal in terms of treating its people well, but I'm saying that we live in the goddamn United States, and if there's one thing that I should take away from existing as a citizen in the United States in 2020, it's that maybe, just maybe, the citizens of a country should not be punished or judged by the laws of its ruling government, because chances are most governments of people in power are probably not the most ethical people, no matter what progressive policies they claim to tout, because they're people who desire to have that level of power and influence, and with great power comes great responsibility. Absolute power corrupts corrupts absolutely all of that kind of shit. So I'm just saying that as an American, I don't want anyone judging me personally for he who must not be named on names one of his countless abhorrent policies and human rights violations. I, as a citizen, do not want to be blamed for his actions. Now, obviously, it is up to me to take action as a citizen who wants to demand a more ethical society. I'm not denying that. I'm saying that sometimes citizens of a country can work as hard as they fucking want to and still not have a government that accurately represents who they are or what they want. People in China should not be denied makeup products just because their government is being shitty. I wouldn't want anyone to deny me something over my government being shitty. Now, I know that's not how capitalism always works, and I think that sometimes, you know, withholding certain things can be a way of pushing a government towards change, because embargoes and tariffs and things of that nature, I would say that in a capitalist society, that is a way that you can move towards change. However, there are lots of companies who do claim that while selling in China, they're working towards ending animal testing. Now, because they're corporations, I cannot claim that I entirely believe them. L'Oreal, for example, there's a lot of things that I don't trust about L'Oreal at all. But, you know, there are lots of brands who are saying that they are making that sort of effort to hopefully move towards animal-friendly guidelines in China. And I certainly hope that that's the case. That's what I'm going to hope for, as the optimist in me. The realist in me says, may or may not ever change. But, you know, at least it seems as though people are trying. I don't think most people are actively trying to do bad things or be bad people. So I don't think people walk into a makeup store and say, hey, I specifically want something that's tested on animals. I would like to see a bunny die so that I can wear this bronzer. I don't think most people are doing that. And so if I can assume that of most people who I know, I can assume that of most people I don't know. As far as the Chinese market goes, I don't think most of the consumers are thinking that, like, oh yes, I'm going to buy this because it supports something potentially unethical. So that is something that I personally need to assume, and that's definitely a bias of mine because I'm someone who, y'all can probably tell this by my channel, I actively go out and do my research about just about anything that I consume. I am trying to be as ethical of a person as I can, but I'm also someone who fucks up, and I also know that not everyone has the luxury or the privilege to have the access to the same knowledge and the same products that I do. And that is not something that I should fault them for. So in all of this, that's not to say that I'm gonna stop being cruelty-free, because I think that animal testing is something that I still don't think it's right. I don't think that there is a situation, at least cosmetically, when it can ever be right. I have some different feelings about, you know, the medical industry and all of that. Like, it's not something fun to think about, but I also know, like, I'm someone who requires certain medicine to keep functioning. My body is a delicate equilibrium with a lot of stuff we've got going on here. That, I think, is definitely a different conversation for another day. But I am saying that there's so much more to think about in terms of makeup ethics that go beyond, like, is it tested on animals? Because cruelty-free is such a loaded term that I'm even, for me personally, I'm even questioning, like, it's not something that I can actually use for myself to describe my makeup habits, when truly I just care about my makeup not being tested on animals and my makeup brands not being owned by a piece of shit. That's all I require. There are other things that I'm learning to value just as much as I value cruelty-free. So buying from independent sellers, buying from Black-owned businesses, people of color-owned businesses, queer-owned, women-owned, as opposed to gigantic corporations. Now, I know that those might be inaccessible in their own way, due to a lot of those being independent makeup companies that might not ship all over the world. To me, supporting a smaller business is so much more important than supporting a large corporation. And I'm not going to be perfect at that. There's a lot of stuff that I buy from Sephora. Case in point, the Fenty bronzer that I have going on right here. And I'm not saying that I'm going to be able to find everything, because guess what? I don't think that anyone is capable of buying exclusively indie makeup and finding everything that they need. Regardless of who you are or where you come from, I highly doubt that you're capable of doing that. If you are, kudos to you. You're probably much better of a person than me. That being said, I think that there are lots of things that we should value just as much as it not being tested on animals. For example, I really want to learn more about ethical sourcing of makeup, because I know that mica mining can be an incredibly cruel industry, and it is fraught with a lot of human rights abuses that I don't think are right, especially when it comes to an item that I consider a luxury like makeup. I do not think that's fair. I don't want to support that. I know that in my makeup buying habits, I have supported it in the past. I will probably knowingly or unknowingly support it in the future, but I want to figure out ways where I could find, you know, more ethically sourced sparkles. Things like that, where I think in order for something to be truly considered cruelty-free or whatever, you can't just take into account if an animal was harmed in the making of it. I think that is absolutely something you should take into account, but it shouldn't be the only thing. It's like, who human-wise is being harmed by this being made? And if there are human rights abuses that are being committed in the process, or you're supporting a business owner who treats their employees like crap and is just like a general racist, sexist shitbag, that's something that should be taken into account into the cruelty-free name just as much as animal testing to me. So let me put on some lipstick and then I'm gonna finalize my thoughts. Thinking, no one's gonna see my lipstick today, whatever. I'm gonna use this Glam Goth lipstick in Perish because I feel kind of grungy and cute. Okay, so I kind of think that that encapsulates my thoughts on the term cruelty-free and kind of how my thoughts on that subject have evolved over the years. I'm not someone who's going to stop advocating against animal testing, but I also think that there's so much more nuance and importance to the conversation than simply saying, oh, I just think animal testing is bad and therefore I don't buy anything sold in China. There is so much more ethics to consuming things and just thinking of it from one specific angle. I feel the same way about vegetarianism and veganism. I find, for me personally, I could never see myself eating meat. To me, that is very reprehensible, but I also recognize that a lot of vegetarian substitutes for meat are not made in the most ethical conditions, and so in order for my diet to be entirely cruelty-free, I would need to look a lot more into sustainable and ethically sourced farms, locally grown produce, things of that nature. And that's basically how I feel about cruelty-free as well. I don't think that buying things that aren't tested on animals exclusively is an inherently bad thing, but there's so much more to the conversation, and we have to be so careful about the xenophobia that comes with it for blaming people in other countries for animal testing and things like that, when in reality I don't think most of us have any sort of control over our government and the way that they function. We can do our best, but really, in 2020, we actually think that? So let me know what you're thinking down below. Please be nice to each other. That's all I care about in the comments section. Thank you so much for watching. Give this a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more videos from me, potentially a little bit less serious. And I will see you all in my next video. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye!